Hello and welcome to The Big Fight, and the question we're going to look at today is whether India is a racist country. Do we display a great amount of racism, and is this in any way different to what we are seeing around the world? Because, by the way, racism and aspects of that are also seeming to be on the rise in many other countries. But here in India, we've just seen that absolutely shocking and completely shameful attack that took place in Bangalore, which really made a lot of us hang our heads in shame. But there are other aspects of it also. We've heard other cases in the recent past where Indians were not allowed to go into certain restaurants or not given preferential access because some Caucasian was allowed to go in first. And that's a bizarre form of extended racism or reverse racism, which is also something that we should be discussing and debating. So where does race and racism figure in India right now, and what is it that we can all do to make sure it is stamped out? That's really the question that we are here to discuss. And let me welcome the panel. We have Vikram Singh, former DGP Uttar Pradesh, a senior member of the Indian police force, with us here, right here with us. Ratan Sharda, columnist, thinker, been close to the RSS, so at least subscribe to their thought process. So it's wonderful to have you with us. Suhas Chakma, who's the director of the Asian Center for Human Rights, has been arguing against racism for a long period of time. So it's wonderful to have you with us. Rahul Ishwar is with us as well, activist. Wonderful that you could join us. Samuel Jack, student from Nigeria, wants to discuss some of the experiences that he's had, and others also, some of his friends who are also with us here in the studios will be hearing that and those cases and seeing what we can do about them. And Professor Mridula Mukherjee, Professor of Modern History, Center for Historical Studies at the JNU, is with us. JNU, of course, in the middle of its own set of issues right now. Shine INC joining us from Mumbai, and of course, last but by no means least, Suhail Seth also with us here. But why don't I just start off by quickly going through with all of you the fundamental question of whether we as Indians are racist. By the way, extended question, are all human beings racist, which is another way of looking at it, but Indians in specific.
India is the original God's melting pot. And if there's any country that has magnanimous, it's India. Vasudhaiva cha Kutumbakam, the original hallmark of our society, came from the Vedic times. Whatever we see is an aberration, and they are not representative.
It is an aberration and it's not representative.
It's not representative.
That's your view. Okay. Would you agree with that?
Well, I would say, first of all, let us frame the issues properly. There are two issues. One is color consciousness of Indians. Fair versus black color or whatever. That's one thing which is colonial hangover. Right. Second is racism. Okay. So let us be very careful when we talk of racism, it is racism, and when we talk of color consciousness, it is not racism.
Okay. I think that's a very good point. And let me just amplify that further to make sure I understand what you're saying. And you're right, we should separate it. So Indians are color conscious.
Oh,
so
yes.
that's
a colonial hangover.
Yeah. And that happens whether you're African or whether you're European or whether you're Indian, you're color conscious.
Or within family also.
Within a family, right? You're right. So within brother, sister, dark skin, light skin, that issue is there. I think that's a valid point. So that's not racism, that's color consciousness, and we should segregate the two. Okay, point well taken, and we will separate them.
Coming to the main issue, racism, as doctor just pointed out, we have a long history of having people coming to India, welcome to India, whether Syrian Christians, whether Jews, whether Iranian Parsis, they have come, they have got assimilated with us. There are Ahom kings who came from Burma, became thoroughly Indian Hindu, and they ruled Assam for 700 years. Only kings who did not allow British to come into Assam. So we have a long history of assimilating.
You're right. So
all
we have a history of assimilation. The culture is one of assimilation. But are we therefore, if you see some of the incidents that we see, if you say here what people are often being told on the streets of any city, in Bangalore,
that's really bad. That's an aberration.
So are we moving away? Are we moving away from what has been the historic Indian traditional culture? Is one of the things to ask. Suhas.
No, I think the entire analogy that we are color conscious, we have learned it from the British, is absolutely wrong. The oldest system of racism is the caste system, and if you look at the history, caste derives from varna, which literally means actually color, and color is only one of the elements of racism. If you look at the definition given by the UN, it talks about distinction, exclusion, restriction, and preference based on color, race, ethnicity, and national origin. So when we talk about
So the origins of racism or color consciousness in your mind come from the caste system and not from colonialism.
It derives from varna system, and I think what we are listening
Want to
today.
respond to that?
No, I mean, let me finish it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think there is racism all over the world. I mean, I face racial discrimination here, but that is not to say that the Bengalis do not face racial discrimination in our areas. I think what we have done over the years essentially have taken an ostrich-like approach. When we talk about racism, we only believe that only white can do it, we cannot do it. And we remain silent when the Indians were thrown out of Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Uganda, and discrimination which was against the Indian across East Africa immediately after the colonization. But today we commit the same crimes and we still take the same ostrich approach, So I am not saying that only the Indians are racist. Racism exists in every society as microscopic as my own community. We have so many pejorative terms against our smallest communities. If I blame the whites or the majority, it's absolutely wrong in today's time.
Okay, fine. There's racism in all parts of it. I'll just come back to that varna issue.
Vikramji, there are 3 questions on it. Is it right to stereotype? Is it right to stereotype? And is it right to stereotype? Whenever a terror attack happens, we always stand up to ultra right wing and say, don't stereotype one particular community. In the same way, why can't we stand up to the ultra left to say that, please don't stereotype a nation? That doesn't mean we don't have issues. Yes, we do have issues. And articulating an issue is as important as addressing it. When you articulate it at racism, the stereotyping backfires. It will add oil to the fire.
Why?
Rather than integration.
No, wait, hang on. Why? Because actually you should make people aware of it. It is happening. If it is happening, if even one person is made to feel uncomfortable on the streets of any of our cities because of his race or his ethnicity, it is something that should be highlighted because people need to be made aware that this is wrong.
Very true.
You should not be
Nobody is
looking
denying that. But articulating an issue in the right context and don't glorifying aberrations is very important. And along with that,
Sure enough,
one
I
more
agree.
thing.
Look, you shouldn't label the entire country and saying
Exactly.
all 1.3 billion people are X because X number of people are
stereotyped,
doing it. However, you do need to create awareness about
We
it
need to
because the
debate
people who are
this,
doing
we
it.
need to discuss this. And regarding the varna point too, varna doesn't mean color. Varna, see, all our gods, Krishna is black, Rama is black, the most respected of all gods in India are black. So, of course, there is diversity, there may be color consciousness.
What's the literal meaning of varna? Tell me.
No, you cannot
what's
take
the
a literal
literal meaning of
There
varna?
is a totally different context. There's a totally
Whatever
different
the context,
to-
what's the meaning of
Also
it?
means one school. Brahmacharya is one word, varna ashram, and there's one vyavastha. Varna ashram would also mean brahmacharya.
Right.
grihastha,
Problem is
sannyas.
there are a lot of words in Sanskrit which cannot be translated easily into English.
let's
We
not-
fall
let's
for the
not-
English translation.
Can we digress? There's a
Yeah.
time and a place
But
to get
that
into
is
the
the basic argument. That's why I'm arguing against it.
Okay, I get it. Let's just come back to the back. I don't want to get you in, Samuel, on this, and actually some other members of the audience also. It's an aberration. It doesn't happen very often. It's once in a while. Bangalore, what happened out there, shocking, but it was an isolated example. Has that been your experience, or is it more widespread than we would care to think?
There is preconceived notions about Africa in this country. And I think the state of India is totally in denial and sometimes in huge contradiction to the fact on the ground. And what I want to say is that, in schools also, I have a younger brother who attends schools, who is going to school in Akepram and in South Delhi. And there are people, his classmates, they bully at him, they poke him, they use all sort of abusive words on him. They use all sort of words which are, not acceptable. And, for me, I think that, there's a perception, there's a color perception in this country that, people who are coming from Africa are medieval in their thinking, they are ancient, they think all sort of things about Africa, and which, to me, is totally not true. And the fact is that, through the course of this discussion, if I'm given the opportunity, I'll be able to point factually to the reality on the ground.
Right? So, would you like to elaborate? So
Yeah,
you're
I'd
saying-
like to elaborate. One aspect is that, in terms of visa, there are students in this country who are genuinely students, who have admission, but when they go to renew their visa, they go through all sort of scrutiny in this country. And in terms of accommodation also, you see an African asking, like he wants to rent a house, they say, no, we don't allow blacks in this place, we don't. But meanwhile, they think, okay, it's related to drugs, like black and crime, black and drug, black and addiction.
So in a sense,
there's this
it's-
specific preconceived notion in this country.
Brother, like what he's saying, that's actually, in a sense, a reflection of what many people feel, that there is a sense of of racism which directly Africans face in large parts of the country. But it's not just Africans. I mean, you'll have people from the Northeast who face that in Delhi. We've done any number of programs and seeing how shocking that is. And it could be extended. You could say that people from mainland India face that thing in the Northeast. South Indians face it from the North. North Indians face it in the South. But I guess some communities, some races perhaps get it worse, like as he's saying, African students in particular, or Africans in particular.
You know, one is the notion of difference, where we constitute the other, you know, as an opposite of who we are. So we have a sense of our own identity, and then we define that sometimes in terms of the opposite of that identity. And then there can be contempt, there can be hatred, there can be acceptance, there can be various things that happen once you objectified somebody into that position. But I think I'd like to bring in some more subtleties. I agree with everything that he said. I mean, from the time that I was in campus 40 years ago to now, I would say, yes, there is prevalence even on campuses of racism. You can't call it by any other word.
Has it gone up or gone down?
No. I would say it again depends from campus to campus. Basically, it's a question of educating yourselves, your society, your people, not denying it, taking it up as a challenge and saying this is wrong.
To the extent that you can, because, you know, again, and I want to come back to this.
No, I want to, can I just, I want to just elaborate that I want to comment on, you know, many origins of racism have been pointed out by the earlier speakers. I would like to say that while it is true that you can trace some origins back to the caste system, you can say something to color consciousness, which is not racism, within, or to, you know, castes. Upper caste look down upon lower caste, but within each caste there are people of darker complexion and fairer complexion. But I think our experience as a colonial people, where we were subjected to racism and we internalized it as a society, and to the extent that we haven't fought against it as an ideology and we now transmit it to others, is where I think fundamentally a lot of the problem lies. So the more we have
Shaina, let me get you in on that point. We just heard what Samuel said, you know, and here you're having a situation where India, for example, is reaching out so much to Africa. We've had this wonderful summit out here. All these African heads of state came and we said, you know, India is a great partner to Africa. But as many commentators have been pointing out recently, what many people reading the news in Africa will be seeing, if their citizens and their people are not going to be treated with respect on the streets of India, it's very difficult for them to say that India is a really good partner to have. Now, that's not to say that India is the only place that happens, and I'm going to come back to that. These are global issues. But what can we do about it?
The 2 points here is that one is we as a society clearly have a complex, because otherwise we wouldn't be advertising want a fair, beautiful bride. That is one aspect which is different, which is a colonial hangover. The more important things is that if we as a society need to understand that if a student can be lynched, finished in the heart of Delhi only because of facial features and belonging to the Northeast, this is a shame to India all across. You talked about Africa, you talked about relationships with country, diplomatic ties is one thing. But if a national is for any reason ostracized, inconvenienced, murdered, mobbed or assaulted on Indian soil, it is clearly an area of concern and needs
even that's bad enough.
But not
just
to suggest that this
being treated disrespectfully is not acceptable.
It could happen in America, it could happen in the UK, it could happen anywhere.
Right. Sohail, two aspects of it. We said, yes, there's color consciousness. So somebody who's of a darker skin, even of the same race, will be treated slightly differently. That's unfortunate, but slightly different. How is it that we are treating people from a different race? And it's pretty shameful.
We are extremely racist. I mean, let's stop being in denial. I mean, I agree with Mridula saying, oh, you know, our colonial past. Look at the way we treat people from the Northeast. Look at the way we treat people from the south of Vindhyas or the north of Vindhyas. Everyone's tarred with the same brush. Oh, Madrasi. But the problem is we don't respect diversity. We talk about it. Diversity is in our constitution, but it's not in our hearts and minds. We make fun of people. We parody it.
But yes, Sohail, but actually what Vikram was saying, and I think Mr. Sadhya was saying is, actually, if you look at where the origin, at what Indian culture historically has been, one of the things that we are supposed to be celebrating the most is diversity.
Yes, but we celebrate it in the corniest possible manner. We celebrate it by making fun of people. I think what happened
Making
with
fun
the
of people is
Africans.
not necessarily bad.
No,
It's
it is.
Sometimes it's a sign of acceptance.
1 minute. Ask the person who is being tarred with that brush whether he likes it or not.
No. Insulting, making fun of, yes, but I mean, there's political correctness. You can't have a joke because that's wrong.
Let me elaborate. Try calling people a chinky and ask the person from the northeast whether he likes being called chinky, and then tell me whether he thinks it's fun or is it an insult. Okay. The problem is we justify.
Here's where
we justify racism by saying, oh, we were only making fun.
Correct. To some extent, the creation of awareness comes in, and maybe that's where the government does need to play a role. What is acceptable and what is not? Because you're right. Making a comment like that, somebody may think you're being funny or not being funny. You're being insulting, you're being abusive, you're potentially hurting someone's feelings, and you know, it should actually be almost considered illegal.
No, but go back to America.
People don't often know that.
Go back to America. No one uses the N-word today. The N-word is seen. No, the N-word is seen to be coming from a mind that is debased.
But the
we have to shame.
I agree. The C word should be treated similarly. Somebody uses a C word out here, that person should be told.
Absolutely.
It should be.
All right. Self-flagellation seems to be a fixation. Somebody is on an overdose of Gunther Grass, Empty Eternity of the East. Go to America. Yes, sir. But
no,
the American
just
police.
Explain all of that again in English.
You are self-flagellating yourself.
And Gunther Grass. I mean, can I tell you one thing? Don't get befuddled by the language that you profess to be excellent in, by mistaking the key point that we are making. We're not talking about go back to America.
You are just going bombastic to be
American police
he is going bombastic, that's
more
all.
people in the last 5 years.
But that doesn't justify
So
killing by the Indian people.
what's the logic?
The logic is
So
that
we
you
do
say
that.
perhaps it is
So do we want to do
India.
that?
I didn't say it's endemic to India.
And
I said we ourselves are
comparison should be
racist.
between comparables.
Absolutely.
Look
Please
at what
don't
is
use
happening
words.
in America.
Look, I'm quite capable of using language myself. Don't ascribe endemic to me. I said we at times tend to be racist. We at times use words which we think are funny,
I was not
but they're not
ascribing
funny.
anything to
Are
anyone,
we
but
not
if there's
stereotyping ourselves, calling ourselves we are racist, as if it's some kind of a compliment on ourselves?
No,
and one
he's
very
making a
pertinent
point
question.
that the majority.
One pertinent question. Are we not being selective? When a leader as senior as Mallikarjuna Kharge was on the floor of the assembly, on the floor of the parliament, said that you people, including all of us, are outsiders.
Yeah.
There was no selective, there was no outrage. Basically, let us be honest, intellectually, the outrage industry is basically a cottage industry by the left liberals. So, if it comes from right wingers, they are
telling me,
industry.
see, if we are to go back to the origin, you and me, we do not look the same. Obviously, in a place where we are majority, will be discriminating against the people. So that's what I said in the beginning. People from Bengal face lots of discrimination in the northeast, and we face discrimination here. The problem is, if you do not recognize the existence of the problem, you cannot create the law. And if you do not create the law, if you do not codify it, it doesn't create any awareness.
Right.
So that's a critical issue.
Right. Recognize the problem.
See, Vikram,
Recognize the problem without constantly saying, well,
problem is law is not the solution.
But government of India is breaking the law. I mean, there is an amendment of the Criminal Law Amendment Act after the killing of Nido Tania. That bill has not been placed. It's a different issue. But the government itself is planning the law.
I am not here to speak about government. I am saying laws are not the solution. People have to be sensitized.
Absolutely.
For example, northern people called everybody Madrasi about 10 years back. With IT, with a lot of people moving north and west, slowly we realized that Madrasis are different. Tamils are different, Telugus are different, Kannada are different, but this education has come through intermingling of people. When people go to northeast, they realize the so-called Chinks are our own people. When you see Kiran Rijiju on screen, you say, okay, this is our person. So this intermingling
But
and this educating the
now
people.
how does that reflect to
important.
somebody? How does that reflect to somebody coming from outside the
we also
country
need
who
to-
is
we also
fully
need-
entitled
we
to be
also
here
need to
and
be
study
educated.
here? And be treated
I want
as
to
a
need
citizen?
to be
interject him. I want to
educated. Why
interject him.
does just a moment?
We talk
Why
about
does
diversity. We talk about diversity in this country. And how do you talk about diversity when, first of all, you have created a negative impression by telling somebody you're Some of them, they use such word, even in my school. And how will you?
I thought the N-word had been banned.
No, I have to tell you, not
That's
here.
why I said law is not the
Law
is
is
not
and
the
how will
solution.
you how will you
Because
create
law
that
creates its
atmosphere
own-
of diversity when you've already in the first instance you have created a negative impression? How will the person who
I
you're
think the
talking
word
to
he
think
used,
about you?
negative impression. When we are discussing racism, we must be aware we are not just talking about difference and not liking or there are two other notions which are very necessary for it to be called racism. One, the feeling of superiority over the other,
It's also there,
and
yeah.
the other is discrimination and
Actually,
contempt.
in India, racism is sometimes practiced in two ways where people from now
Yes.
set aside racism to other Indians. if you look at racism from people coming from outside,
Right.
it's sometimes two ways. You have a concept of superiority or negative racism
Right.
to people coming from some countries,
Yes.
Africans, for example. And then when somebody comes from Europe,
Yes.
you say, well, we're going to seat you first, or feed you first, or allow you into the restaurant and keep
Yeah.
Indians out, which is
I'll-
equally obnoxious.
But
I'll
see,
give
the
one
way-
example
the
of
way ahead
racism.
is integration.
Can I give an
think
example
We've
of
had
media
a number of
racism?
cases recently. There were hashtags on Twitter a few years ago that cafes should
I'll
be
give
blocked.
an example
because
of media racism. How do
media
we cover?
racism.
Yeah.
Now, that's a new one.
How? Just a moment. How do we cover the extremist violence in Nigeria, in Somalia or Kenya, and how do we cover Paris attack? Paris attack comes all over. You start burning candles and whatnot, and you don't even talk about Somalia. Don't talk about Nigeria. So why so? Because Africa is that so-called dark continent, and we don't accept it.
But that,
Point is, you don't accept it.
I mean, yes and no.
I
I mean,
talked
Boko
to a
Haram
channel, I
attacks
said-
have been getting a fair amount of press,
No, no,
as
no,
much
it's
as
not true. You
yeah,
please
Paris is
look back. Look
Yeah.
at the minutes.
okay. Fine.
See, the point would be the way ahead is integration. I think we will all agree on it. What are the ways for integration? A kind of instigation playing Africans against Indians is not the way. We accept there are problems, especially coming from South. I know the word racism can open a Pandora's box because race has different connotations in the South.
Right.
It is
I get it.
dangerous.